free.
Next project, about Kingston, Kingstontian.
You got the clicker?
It's right there by John. Here.
So,
Any recusals?
I'm gonna hang up over here.
okay. So we've seen, this is the City of Kingston, the Kingstonian Development Group. This is a proposal for approximately, you have the numbers in here. So this is a map amendment. So the only thing we're looking at tonight is the map amendment. And the map amendment essentially extends what they call the mixed-use overlay district in the City of Kingston to about a .313 acre property at the base of Schwank Drive and at the base of Fair Street. Anybody knows this property? It's formerly a diner that used to exist down there. The acreage disturbance area is not really .313 at this particular point in time. It's just a zoning change, and it's moving. The current zoning is C2, and this would basically leave the C2 zoning in place, but create this mixed-use overlay district on top of it. So if I could figure out how that works, I guess I don't. So this is the actual area that we're talking about. So this is the existing parking facility. This is a warehouse that's owned, and this is the area that we're talking about in terms of the rezoning. It's that yellow line around that particular lot. Looking at this on an air photo, you can see the diner, the former diner that was here. The warehouse is here. This is the existing parking that the City of Kingston owns. This is the City of Kingston lot. This is Fair Street. The proposal actually closes Fair Street on top, creates a, well, I can show you that. This is hatched in here because Fair Street, we're not sure what the final outcome with respect to Fair Street is, whether it's going to remain a city street at this at the base, or whether it's going to become part of the project to enter and exit the proposed underground parking garages in this location. And so the reason we hatched that is to be aware that if it's going to end up being part of the project, there should be some consideration in terms of what the zoning is for this particular parcel, as well as not just the parcel boundaries here. This is an overview of the project itself relative to how it operates. You can see the closure of Fair Street in this area, and that's that area that was hatched. This is the area where the diner is in here, and you can see this is a hotel facility with residents in the back of it, and this is the major residential facilities on the other side of Fair Street.
Looks like there's a connection.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan and their response and some of the affordable housing units. But we spend an awful lot of time on this project talking about what should be done or sort of the things that the city should clean up in moving forward. I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the project itself and why how the city got here, and also what's good about the project. Because oftentimes we get accused of basically saying nay things when we're really just trying to help the community through a process. And developers and the city itself forgets that there's actually, the planning board's actually looked at the project and looked at it in terms of why there are certain things that are really appropriate for this particular project. So number one, if you start thinking about the project in terms of what it's trying to accomplish, it's higher density residential housing in an area with water and sewer, and it's currently underutilized by the city, and it's currently a city site. So that's the number one thing that you need to think about. The second thing is that the project actually is a mixed-use project. It actually provides for about 8,000 square feet of retail space, as well as a boutique hotel, and I forget the number of units associated with that. But that's also a plus. So high density in an underutilized area in the city with water and sewer, and a mixed-use project consistent with some of the requirements of the mixed-use overlay district. The other thing you can say is that the city is trying and has tried to make sure that they can recreate that public parking garage that fell down a while back. And this project actually is moving to do that work associated with the parking garage. So that said, where are we in terms of what our recommendations were in the past versus what we're looking at now? When we looked at this project in 2019, it was done, I think, in December or
September.
September. I'm sorry. I knew it was a burp. So when it was done in September, what we said is that we took a look at the comprehensive plan, and we said that one of the strategies in the comprehensive plan, remember the project was originally proposed without affordable housing. One of the things that we said is the comprehensive plan basically said that they should require new and affordable housing for any new or expanded residential building or development project. This didn't do it at that particular point in time. We also noted that the city also provided in its comprehensive plan a strategy to abandon the mixed-use overlay district. So the city basically said to itself that we don't want to use this district anymore. What we want to try to do is create a citywide standards for adaptive reuse and affordable housing, both in terms of how much should be there and what their design should be. So that recommendation was a standard set of rules regarding the provision for all multifamily residential applications in the city should be promulgated regardless of the location. So with that in hand, with that in hand, the city zoning enforcement officer, in response, I think, to some of the criticisms that this board provided, as well as some concerns from others involved, rendered a ruling with respect to whether the mixed-use overlay district actually permitted new construction, and whether if that new construction was permitted, it required affordable housing. The original language, the statutory language, said that adaptive reuse would require 20% of those adaptive reuse of units to be affordable. The city zoning enforcement officer basically said that doesn't apply. So we now have a ruling from the city zoning enforcement officer that states that the district is not, A, that new construction is permitted, and B, that new construction is not required to provide affordable housing. So that ruling sort of basically says, really the city can't rely on the mixed-use overlay district anymore to provide affordable housing anywhere in the city, not only just this project, but anywhere else in the city because of that ruling. So that's a real problematic way to move forward if we're going to allow the mixed-use overlay district to continue. We do also, however, note that in response to some of the concerns being expressed with regard to the lack of affordable housing, that the applicant has voluntarily indicated that he would include affordable housing in the project, and if you do the math, it's about 10% of the total number of units. So in our 9/14/2000, so it was September, our 9/14/2019 recommendation, I'm not getting any smiles from anybody down there, aren't I?
It's a tough room
Our overarching recommendation rests on the city's own planning documents. We basically went back and we looked at the planning documents and we said, we find the map amendment to be inconsistent with the purposes of the mixed-use overlay district in the comprehensive plan, and therefore it should not be implemented without a clarification of the ability of the district to be used to issue special permits for new construction, and additionally, if such new construction is allowed by special permit, the provision of affordable housing shall apply. But we now have a ruling from the building inspector that basically says it can be used for new construction, but affordable housing is not provided. So in that recommendation, we gave them effectively two options, and I won't read all of this, but effectively what we said, option one, what you can do relative to this map amendment that's being proposed and relative to the Kingstontian project is throw out the mixed-use overlay district, which is what the comprehensive plan says to do, establish a new district and establish a way that new district essentially provides for affordable housing. That was what we gave them as option one. Option two was you can take the mixed-use overlay district, allow new construction by special permit or whatever you want to do, and require that new construction include a percentage of affordable housing. We didn't tell them what percentage it should be, we just said it should provide a percentage of affordable housing. So where we are now is, we know that, and what we said is this should be as part of a map amendment. So if we're going to amend the map, you should also amend the language in the statute. Is everybody following me on this? Mm-hmm. Okay, so where we are now is we know, okay, the negative declaration issued by the Kingston Planning Board addresses the issue in terms of whether or not there's a material conflict with the comprehensive plan and other goals and objectives of the plan of the community in its findings. And it simply says that they found no conflict. They had the ruling of the zoning enforcement officer. They have they looked at their areas and they basically said, we don't think that there's a conflict with the goals, but they do specifically note that a welcome addition to the project in response to public and agency comments accordingly, 14 affordable housing units, and notes that this is a welcome addition to the project in response. So part of this finding that there's no material conflict notes the provision for affordable housing. So the lead agency's determination regarding the zoning petition and its lack of conflict with the community plans and goals is officially adopted is the critical question before the Common Council and before the County Planning Board. The Common Council is somewhat bound by the lead agency's determination, and some would argue it's absolutely bound by that, but that bounding is in response to the voluntary inclusion of affordable housing as part of the project. So we also want to bring up that the negative declaration issued by the Kingston Planning Board also addresses something called community character and historic resources. OPRHP, which is otherwise known as SHPO, the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, has issued an adverse effect for the project. And so what the adverse effect letter basically says is that as the project ties in, the project elements tie in the commercial elements on Schwank Drive with the historic district, which is located up on Front Street, thank you, on North Front Street. And they talk about massing, they talk about the closing of Fair Street, but the legal agency determination regarding the community character and zoning petition and its lack of conflict with community plans and goals officially approved is a critical question before the Common Council. When you read the negative declaration by the Planning Board, they almost don't seem to get the gist of that letter from LPRHP relative to why there's an impact on the Stockade District. They talk about visibility of the project from Fair Street, they talk from Schwank Drive, they talk about other things, but they never succinctly address the tie-in between that OPRHP seems to be more concerned about, is the tie-in between moving the project elements down slope or cross slope to tie into the Schwank Drive commercial area, as compared with the traditional ending of that at the Montgomery Ward building or at the top of the hill. Everybody following me so far?
Yep.
Okay. Was that Mark? Of course it was. I didn't have to turn around. So, required modifications. The place where we are with respect to affordable housing, I want you to remember that overarching goal was to provide affordable housing. The place where we are with affordable housing now is we have a zoning enforcement officer provision that it's not needed and new construction can proceed without it. And we have an applicant's essentially voluntary look at this and saying, we'll be happy to provide it. I mean, maybe not happy is maybe is taking that a bridge too far, but they've decided to provide it. So rather than sort of giving them option 1 and option 2, which is sort of trying to lay out a process and a framework, what we're trying to say is the goal that we're having here is to make sure that the affordable housing is part of the project. And if that's the case, then the voluntary provision offered by the developer is offset by the ruling of the ZEO. While the board will not require a specific change. We're not going to tell them exactly what to do. What we are going to tell them what to do is essentially this, that the housing element as offered is voluntary, and it should be enshrined in the city's planning approvals in a manner that defines affordability and the time frame for those units to remain. In short, what we're trying to say is, it's voluntary today. We want to make sure that in our planning approvals, it doesn't disappear tomorrow. We don't care how you do that to the city, but if you can accomplish those goals in any way that you want to, we're happy with it. That's a little bit changed from saying, please change the statutory language, or please do this, or please do that. It simply says you now have a voluntary. There's things in New York state law that you can do that are different from making changes. You can do contract rezoning. You can think about other ways that they may be able to accomplish this. So rather than tell them how to do it, we're simply saying is, you have a voluntary offer on the table. Looking at that voluntary offer, you should move to make it not voluntary anymore as part of your approval process. That it has to be done for the project to be constructed.
So essentially what they've agreed to do, the applicants agreed to do, is do option 2, and what we're suggesting is that they now make it codified. Since they've basically done option 2, let's make it law.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Now, did they accept that though?
Did who accept that?
Did the city of Kingston accept?
Well, they haven't seen it yet. So I can't
No,
tell you
no,
that they accepted it.
They voluntarily gave the low-income housing?
Yes.
The applicant has proposed 14 units of low-income housing, I shouldn't say low-income, affordable housing
Okay.
within the project.
So they've accepted that into the project then?
And they've
The
included it as part of their
city, the
next step.
city has included it as part of its neg deck.
Okay.
All right, the city, if you're asking me if the city said no to affordable housing, I presume they wouldn't. But,
But again,
yeah. So I mean, my sense is that the city is ecstatic with respect to the provision of affordable housing.
okay, good.
So advisory comments. And this goes back to that ruling by the zoning enforcement officer. Clearly, the mixed-use overlay district doesn't meet the goals of the city relative to affordable housing citywide in any way, shape, or form. So the advisory comment is to strongly urge the city to abandon the mixed-use overlay district and adopt a citywide solution to affordable housing. Now, the city is working on affordable housing right now. They're working on either a task force or a committee or something of that nature. They're headed in this direction. They don't know when they're going to get there, but they're headed in this direction. And it's not as uncomplicated as you think it is. So the key here is that the recognition is that they should do something besides stick with the existing mixed-use overlay district. And then the second recommendation has to do with, remember that discussion relative to the OPRHP letter and the response to that in the negative declaration by the planning board. We think that this rezoning offers the city an opportunity to provide a more clearer recommendation or a clearer response to the adverse effect letter that was issued by OPRHP. And so what we're saying to the city is, as part of this rezoning, you should basically look at this and go in and understand and revisit that, I shouldn't call it revisit, re-examine and clarify the neg declaration in terms of why it's not an adverse effect as it relates to the rezoning. That would clearly indicate that going over the ridge or going down to Schwank Drive is not detrimental to the district as a whole. And this is not important for the city because the city's zoning changes and the city's planning approvals, the Office of Parks and Recreation and SHPO are not an involved agency. So they provided that to the city. And the city generally, although in the past there's one instance where I'm aware of where they haven't waited for the full change out with respect to OPRHP. But the city in the past, the Irish Cultural Center would be one thing that I would look at, and there's others, has taken real heart in what the Office of Parks and Recreation people have said. So rather than just say, well, we just disagree with you, I think it's important that they explain a little bit more detail why. And the other reason it's important is there's state monies involved here. And the state monies that are involved are going to require that they clear up that adverse effect letter. Otherwise, they're not going to be eligible for state funding. They'll run into issues with respect to their, I shouldn't say eligible, but they'll run into issues with respect to their state funding.
Is there any reason that we can't make that a required modification?
Because I don't think it rises to that level of importance because the city, it doesn't affect the city's approvals, it affects more the state's approvals of the funding. So that's why I didn't make it a required modification.
But they're not, it seems to me that we expect them to give us a reasoned explanation why they don't accept our recommendation.
Well, there is an explanation in the negative declaration as to why they don't think the Historic Preservation Officer's recommendations or adverse effect letter applies. From my perspective, and it's only my perspective now, I think it could be better explained. So I would have even made this comment had they explained it better. But I don't think it rises to a level where we want to make it a required modification.
Dan, it seems to me they're talking about visual impact. Is there any other impacts that might apply?
They're actually not so much talking about visual impacts as is what the district is today versus what it will be with the project there. It's not necessarily a visual impact, it's literally the historic nature of the Stockade District essentially has confined those types of buildings to the top portion of North Front Street. And as you move down off of that, it's more commercial areas, and that's what the zoning actually reflects, the C2 zoning at the bottom of it. And and what they're saying is that from the massing of this building, and if you look at the massing as it relates to the back of the building, and from the closing of Fair Street, and there's one other one, Rob, correct me what else is, there's three things that they call out. So there is some visual work here, but the main thing is that it's the intrusion of the project, that it's not a clear differentiation between where the Stockade District ends and where the commercial district starts. And that's, the city, I think, can do a fine job of explaining this. I don't think that it's not unusual. It's not unusual for the city to, it wouldn't be difficult for this to the city to explain. Okay?
Okay, and for the closing of Fair Street, the lower Fair Street, if it's not going to be used for access in and out of the project, what use would it have?
So it will be used for access in and out of the project. The main reason I bring it up, and that's, we're down, I think you're talking about here, right? You're down.
Yeah, the next one.
Yeah, right. The main reason I bring it up is that if it's a public road, it's consistent, it'll probably be consistent with the C2 zoning district that's there. If it ends up being part of the project and not a public road, they should know whether or not they shouldn't find out later whether they need this to be part of the zoning change or they don't need it as part of the zoning change. And all this is saying is clean that up, and if you need it, run the line through there, and if you don't need it, then we're fine.
Yeah, I'm wondering why they're, yeah.
You know, sometimes you get involved in things, you say, well, let's just rezone the parcel, and meanwhile, you've got the
Well, it's foolish because they're obviously gonna close the street, they're obviously
Well,
gonna use that as
I'm
a
not sure
layout.
that I'm not sure that the bottom half, I know they're gonna close the top half, but that's already zoned appropriately. The bottom half, I know it's gonna be open for vehicle traffic, because they have to get
Well, no,
cars
the
in.
bottom half is gonna be basically the entrance to the parking lot.
We don't
Right,
know if it's
and
gonna
that could be a
private
public
road or a
street,
public
because
road.
it's a public parking garage.
Right,
that's-
they've got.
We just don't know.
They've got several hundred spaces
Yeah.
for public parking.
Public use.
But so with that, you're basically saying if they're using it to access the public parking, then they don't need to rezone that.
You know, all I'm saying is they should be clear,
All right.
as they should, it's something we thought about, they should be clear that whether it's needed or not needed.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying either way.
Yep.
But they should be clear whether it's needed or not needed. And then the other one that's here is, the neg deck now includes a deviated pilot by the Ulster County IDA. And
You know, they're rezoning part of the street. I'm still hung up on this street thing.
you don't get hung up.
And
Please
what-
don't.
and have they
For
looked at,
me, it's not an important issue at all.
have they looked at the impact of closing that
Yes.
street?
Absolutely. And it's contained in their discussion of traffic impacts, and it's contained in their explanation to SHPO about why the street is being closed in terms of its historic nature. This SHPO actually calls the street historic in some instances.
Really?
Yeah.
I would think so. That wasn't.
All right.
That hasn't been historic.
So the other thing that we commented on the last time was,
When I'm walking my dog.
this is a public-private partnership. Remember what I said in the beginning. This is a public-private partnership. And we've seen a lot of data on the positive economic stuff relative to what's been put out by the applicant. The neg deck now indicates that before there was some discussion about there was going to be a pilot, but it wasn't clear who was going to do it, whether it was going to be done, et cetera. Now the neg deck basically does say that there's going to be a deviated pilot by the Ulster County IDA.
What is that, deviated
It's not a standard pilot under the Unified Tax Exemption policy. IDA has a Unified Tax Exemption policy, it won't be a standard pilot.
Dennis, what is the percentage?
We don't know, and that's what we're saying.
It hasn't been reviewed yet by the IDA, has it?
No discussion of the pilot appears in the economic data release to date, and it goes back to that, my question is, it goes back to that discussion that we had, that essentially the transparency here in terms of what the applicant is asking the public to participate in terms of moving the project forward. There are those that will say to us that we shouldn't be involved in that discussion. That's not a county planning board planning board concern. So if the board does not want to put that in, let me know and we'll leave it out.
It's a part of the secret process, and that's certainly a part of our aspect.
Yeah.
They have to be, the IDA has to be included as a involved agency.
Yeah.
They're a state agency. It absolutely involves the county planning department. Economic is absolutely part of
I
secret.
mean, the arguments and the case law supports the fact that the economic argument doesn't come into seeker unless there's significant environmental impacts. If there's not significant environmental impacts, you don't have to balance the economics against the environment. That said,
If,
But all
there
they're,
is clearly an ask here from another public agency.
well, all they're saying is what they're proposing to the IDA. They have no idea what the outcome of that. The IDA
Well-
still has to do their public hearing. I mean, the IDA has a matrix, and they're obviously proposing a deviation from the matrix.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean the IDA is going to accept it.
I just think that, well, one of the reasons we made the comment in the past was in a public-private partnership, when you have this discussion, putting everything on the table in terms of what the public is being asked to participate in to fund your garage is something I think is something that we thought was worthwhile relative to the overall discussion of the project. It seemed to cause some consternation, but the question to you is now that we know that there is, in point of fact, a pilot here, because the neg deck mentions it, we still don't have any numbers.
Is it a coordinated secret review?
It is.
And IDA is not mentioned as an involved
It
agency?
is.
But it's an advisory comment anyway, Dennis, so they can choose to ignore it and do nothing about it, and there's no repercussions, so.
I think we should stick to what we'd already said.
You're
to
just
support
bringing
this
it to
tonight.
light, that's all.
Okay. So where we are is required modifications is some way to move affordable housing from voluntary to mandatory. We're not telling them how, but some way to do that as part of the planning process within the city. And then the rest of it, and I think the most, in my sense, there's two important things here. One is this strong urging to basically say, you need to do something about you can't continue with this, given the ruling that's out here by your zoning enforcement officer, you can't continue with this district and point to it as if it's gonna solve your affordable, or even address in any way, shape, or form your affordable housing provisions. And the next thing is, I think, is that, and this is more of an opportunity rather than a problem, the opportunity that this represents to the city in terms of the rezoning map, further explain to the Office of Parks and Recreation in terms of why there's not a significant impact on the historic district.
Dennis, one last question. This is ancient history, the old parking garage, where it was up top on the top of Fair Street, where's the new one gonna be?
This is
In
it.
place.
It's going to be underneath the building, and the building will be on top of it. I wouldn't say that the footprint is exactly the same because it's going to be on both sides of Fair Street. So let me just go back. Sorry, if you give me, I don't want to take up. Whoops, sorry. Where'd I go, Robert?
You went wrong.
I know I did. I went wrong is right.
Wait, you're done. What have I done? There. Oh, now we're good. Right.
Can you? So, notice, so,
Okay.
I wanna go to the next one. So, see this?
Yeah,
This
it's
is
got a
Fair
walkway.
Street, so we have an entrance to a parking garage on this side, and an entrance to a parking garage
We also have a walkway, looks like connecting.
over here.
Yeah, there's
No,
a,
up above.
That arch
Yeah.
No, this,
Yeah.
that's not a walkway,
Oh,
that's
no?
that's a,
atrium,
that's an atrium across an existing at-level, at-grade pedestrian plaza.
Oh,
and you'll be able to access
that's
that
deceiving.
and then go across
Yeah.
the bridge there.
Okay.
And don't hold me, I gotta remember, don't hold me to this parking garage, but I know that there's a parking garage on, I gotta try
I
to
think you might
orient.
actually be able to.
Yeah,
It's like
but,
embedded,
it's underneath.
it's like embedded.
yeah,
Like
it's
you
embedded,
said, there's
but
gonna
I
be-
don't know exactly where it goes underneath the building, but it is underneath the building. Does that help, does that answer your question? Who answered that, who asked that question? I apologize. Victor, thank you, I'm sorry, did I answer your question? So go back to the recommendations.
Why is this back to us?
It's a
Because-
completed seeker, that's, well.
They
okay.
completed the seeker process, they sent it to us without having seeker done.
Okay.
So we asked them to resubmit, and that's why it's back, and also the provision for affordable housing. That's now there. And so, I think what we wanna do is,
You're on the right line.
am I right spot? Yeah, that's right. So I think what we wanna do is,
Back to,
back to, thank
no,
you.
you're going forward now.
You take the controls away from him, Rob.
I press the button, it goes the same way, both buttons.
Is there a way we
There you
could
go.
be more,
This is what you want.
But, so I'm pretty much, if I can't run the technology, I'm pretty much done, so.
I'm concerned with the pilot component.
In terms of it being there?
No, I think it needs to be stronger, worded a little bit stronger.
Well, we weren't stronger-
If we can, because quite frankly,
We weren't stronger the first time, and I'd hate to go back and change a recommendation that we made the first time to make it any stronger. This is just asking, what this does is simply say that, the neg deck now mentions it, and you should, it's
They
part of
should
this
stand up.
transparency discussion.
Right, but we can't take away the applicant's ability
Yeah,
to
no.
apply for a
No.
But in
pilot.
the end,
But I'm
you're
just-
saying you better be careful because you're gonna screw up your funding. So it's on them.
Well, I think it's more of, I'm trying to think this, it's more of public-private partnerships are not, should be, much more upfront about what they're asking the public to
Yeah.
participate in. And to the extent that we've seen this, to the level that we're talking about now, with no indication of what the public is being asked to participate in, I think is something that you raise a voice on, but I don't think you basically say that this doesn't make the project go away no matter what it is. And it doesn't make the project bad or good, no matter what it is.
And
It's just
also-
something that the public should know.
But also
It's like
then
traffic, it's like anything else.
Too, before they can get the pilot, the IDA has to do a public
Exactly.
hearing
Yeah,
in the city of Kingston,
Yeah.
within the jurisdiction. And I will tell you, having gone through it, they take it really very
yeah,
seriously.
yeah.
So,
And is it an
that's
end-all,
the
be-all
more
to the
appropriate,
project?
yeah.
I can't answer that question.
So could we reword that particular one to actually make a recommendation? Because right now it's just a comment that we didn't see it, but if we want to see it, I think we can reword it to say that.
Well, what the original recommendation was in the original letter, we can go back and just indicate that there should be more transparency in the thing, and that the public has a right to know what its level of participation is to make the project go forward.
I think that would be appropriate
Okay.
to say,
That's fine,
yeah.
that's fine.
We actually mentioned pilot as part of advisory comment last time, and
Yeah.
being transparent, and that's
Yeah.
what we're asking
Yeah.
for.
But I think the wording needs to make that clear.
Yeah, and we'll use the same wording as last time.
Okay.
If that makes the board happy.
That makes
I'm good with
sense.
All right, I'm done.
I'll make a motion to approve the
Second.
comments.
any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Recused?
Thank you.
Two.